So, a very warm good evening to all present here. I'm Sri Lakshmi Anil. I welcome you all to the webinar conducted by the RITHU Club, which is associated with the Bhumitra Sena of State Kerala in Naipunnya School of Management. And I'm glad to say that we have a very dynamic group of audience joining us from every corner of our country. A heartfelt thank you for all joining us today. So now I invite our Vice Principal, Ms. Pushpa John, to address the gathering. I welcome you, ma'am.
Reverend Father Baiju George Principal, Ms. Vijayalakshmi Dadar, the heads of the department, my faculty colleagues, and my dear students. Bhumitra Sena Club of Naipunnya School of Management, an initiative by the Department of Environmental and Climatic Change, has been very active since its inception in 2012. The main aim of the club is in creating awareness in youth through environmental education and Bhumitra Sena activities. Today, as part of World Ozone Day observance, the club has arranged a webinar on the topic Government versus Environment, Building Awareness Among Youth, a relevant topic of the times for the youth to safeguard, protect, and preserve the nature's gift. Let me in the first instance congratulate the team, Bhumitra Sena, especially the coordinators, Mr. Renju Chandran, Ms. Mary Joseph, and all the team members for their efforts and active involvement in environment-related activities. It's my pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to this webinar. I welcome Reverend Father Baiju George Principal, who is a lover of flora and fauna, a person who encourages, supports, and guides in all the activities of the institution. I welcome you, Father, to this session.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
We are happy to have with us the guest of the day, the speaker on the topic, Government versus Environment, Building Awareness Among Youth. Our guest, the speaker, is Ms. Vijayalakshmi Dadar. She is a prominent social worker, environmentalist, journalist, and worked in several publications. She is the bureau chief of the Indian Observer, USA. I welcome you, ma'am, on behalf of Naipunnya School of Management. Hearty welcome to you, ma'am. I welcome all the heads of the departments, the coordinators, all the faculty members, and students to this session. Hearty welcome to one and all to this session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to welcome the faculty coordinator of RITHU Club, Mr. Renju Chandran, for introducing the significance of the topic. I welcome you, sir.
Sir, please on your mic.
I'm very sorry. Okay. Respected Principal Baiju Pandamballi, Vice Principal Pushpa John, Resource Person of the Day Ms. Vijayalakshmi Nadarji, teaching and non-teaching staff, and my nature lovers who expected our webinar invitation and joined. A very good evening to one and all. I'm really happy that we able to provide what we are trying for the last couple of months. Today, when we are starting our journey in webinar, me and my club so blessed that we won't get the right person than this to introduce this topic. Today, when we discussing on the topic government versus environment, bringing an awareness among the youth, I firmly believe that this is the topic will have a significant role in coming years. Well, when the subject is environment, the general perception of the public is that the resource of such importance can only be adequately safeguarded by the benevolent or all-encompassing hands of the government. But that's not the truth, as you know that. Whether the protection comes in the guise of the Environmental Protection Agency, the Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, or any other variation of the federal, state, or local levels, many citizens fears that leaving environmental stewardship in the hands of big business or selfish individual would result in the whole destruction of our land, water, and air. The zeal with which our legal system handles alleged enemies of the environment grows ever stronger. Most of the damage of the state does to our environment comes when it seeks to help a particular segment of the population at the expense of the rest. With the concentrated benefits and diffused cost under the mask of the public good, these efforts have created many of the most glorious examples of abuse. Ultimately, it is the state violation of the property right that leads of many of the environmental ills laid at the feet of private citizens and business. The greatest ecological disaster in the world have occurred in those countries where property rights did not exist. For example, in the former Soviet Union, East Germany. For example, you can see those countries. And this is nothing inherently wrong with the settling a house or building construction in the highways or anywhere, but it is wrong to force other to share the cost of doing so. A person's right to his property is inalienable. Whenever the government encourages and sanctions policies that steal the property, whether directly or indirectly, it's act immorally. And with that, several examples we have faced in the recent years. We have cleared out many forests in our India, in our state itself, and we are suffering this because of that. Many flora and fauna we lost. We are losing our ecosystem. We are losing our biodiversity, and with that, I think it's dangerously leading to a food chain also. So, in terms of environmental protection, the state is not exempt from the law of unintended consequences. Even when acting from the good intention, the government will cause problems where none existed or permit the continuation of problems that adhere to property rights would end. In reality, the issue is not the government versus the environment, but rather government versus individual and their rights. Only discussion can result from failing to understand that. I think I justify to the topic. I'm more to this enlightening this topic. We have got a strong, powerful resource person, and she will enlighten this. Hand over to Sri Lakshmi. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words. I'm sure that we should have a very engaging discussion which should propel our mind's direction of progressive development. The topic that we shall be discussing today is government versus the environment. Environment is omnipotent. We exist because of environment. Since the beginning of mankind, various revolutions and evolutions take place. But the only thing that is constant is our Mother Earth. But now, we live in a society where we are trying to destroy everything because we exist to ensure our own survival in the future. I will not take much of your time because I'm sure that you are as eager to hear our speaker today as well. According to the United Nations 6th Global Environment Outlook Report, it has been estimated that millions of people could die in Asia prematurely by the year 2050 due to the lack of air and water pollution. Unless urgent action is taken, this surely rings the alarm bells. And to discuss more about the topic, we have our resource person. And before introducing our speaker to you, here are some rules and regulations that all should follow. The rules and regulations are: everyone should mute their mics while the speaker is presenting. Question and answer session has been scheduled for 15 minutes after the resource person has presented. You can unmute your mics only then. And during the question and answer session, we will be providing a feedback form in the chat box, and certificates will be issued only to those who fill the feedback form. And those who want to ask questions to the resource person should be giving their names in the chat box before, so that we can allow time for you to ask questions. Once again, I will read out the rules and regulations. Everyone should mute their mics while the resource person is presenting. The question and answer session has been scheduled for 15 minutes after the resource person has presented, and you can unmute your mic only there. And during the question and answer session, we will be providing a feedback form in the chat box. Certificates will be issued only to those who fill the feedback form. And those who want to ask questions to our resource person, they should be giving their names in the chat box before, so that we can allow time for you to ask questions. And to discuss more about our topic, government versus environment, we have with us Ms. Vijayalakshmi Nadar, streaming live directly from the United States of America. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us today. It's an honor to have you with us. She doesn't need a further introduction, but just to give a brief about her, she is a USA-based, presently heading as the Regional Bureau Chief of the Indian Observer. She has been a fearless journalist for over 2 decades and had worked in several publications in Mumbai, India. She has worked for the Pioneer, the Daily, Afternoon Dispatch and Courier, Free Press Group, Life Positive, freelanced for the Federal, The Week Midday, Deccan Herald, Herald Citizen, South Asian Times. She is a broadcaster, commentator, interviewer, besides being an investigative journalist. And she has covered several briefs, including politics, civil affairs, law, health, public, crime, sports, and environment. And she has also been an assistant producer for a documentary film commissioned by PBS on Metropolitan in Chennai called Crime and Darkness on the Edge of Town. She has also been a guest faculty teaching journalism at the School of Broadcasting, Mumbai. So now, I kindly request Vijayalakshmi ma'am to enlighten us with your presentation. Thank you all.
Okay, you all need to help me a little here. First of all, a warm welcome to you all, and thanks a lot, Ranju, for inviting me to this thing. It's a deep pleasure and an honor to be speaking to all of you all today. I'm a little unfamiliar with Google Meet because I'm used to doing my meetings on Zoom. So can you just tell me what you see on the screen for me? Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can.
Okay, now let me know when you are not able to see it. So, okay, let me start now. Thanks a lot again. And before I start about environment, I want to know, how involved are today's youth in environment today? Pretty less, I would say, because the media does not inform us. And the reason why the media does not inform us is because it's not very high on the agenda. Now, what is the reason why we need to pay attention to environment? It's because most people think that it's an issue for the past. If you see the floods that happened in Kerala and the rest of the country, it's not gone down. It's increased. Every year, the flooding is increasing. And on one side is the floods, on one side is the drought. So why is that happening, and why is the government not making it an agenda? Now, with little or no reports in these key areas, I would like to say that the government could probably, where the government can be held responsible, activism in both these areas seem to die down. Just a handful of activists made the headlines once in a while. This is how it's been happening over the last several years. Considering how low the environment figures in a government agenda, it comes as no surprise when a biennial report of Yale University and Columbia University in association with the World Economic Forum has ranked India at 177 among 180 countries on the Environment Performance Index. The two big reasons for that could be that the cleaning up of the environment to ensure clean air and water for the citizens, to ensure that cities, towns, villages are garbage free, all require smart work, which unfortunately hardly any political parties want to put their efforts in. Okay, there are two topics that I would like to be talking today about. One is the EIA, the reason why EIA so little is known and so little is discussed about it. And secondly, I would also like to talk about how big projects in the past has been an absolute disaster. Though we think that big projects is what pushes the country forward in development, that really is not the case. Okay. What happens is, like, the two big reasons for that could be cleaning, considering how low the environment figures in the government's agenda is, like I told you. The two big reasons for this could be that cleaning up of the environment to ensure clean air and water for the citizens, to ensure that the cities, towns, villages, and garbage are garbage free, all require a lot of smart work, which unfortunately hardly any political parties want to put their efforts in. Now, the thing is, once in power, it is absolute loot time for the political parties. India is rich in natural resources, which can be systematically stripped off without the citizens even being aware of it. Most of the time, we are not even aware of it. I am happy, therefore, to share my understanding of the subject as a journalist and as a concerned citizen. There is much disquiet in the media on the subject of EIA. Despite the fact that the draft proposes to give complete control to the government to make decisions on projects, however detrimental they are to the environment, without any public involvement. In the process, attempts are on to drastically cut down citizen rights in opposing those ecologically disastrous projects, besides reducing the interferences of the courts and the central governments as well. What happens is, as soon as the government comes to power, each government tries to take complete charge of it. It's like, you voted us into power, now forget it, let us do our work. In the process, what they are doing is they are trying to cut down the powers of the state government and the courts, so that the central government can proceed without any distraction, without any curbs to their power whatsoever. The government thought that they would sneak in this dangerous bill. During the COVID crisis, they brought in the EIA. I don't know if you all have been reading a little, at least a little about it. There are a lot of smart YouTubers who have been talking about EIA. There's one in Kerala also. I saw that he had millions of views on that. If you all have not seen it, I would advise you all to go see him. The government thought that they would sneak in this dangerous bill while the lockdown was on and would therefore be caught off guard. There was a flurry of emails. Actually, what happened is, the government introduced the EIA saying, it asked for participation, it asked for the people, their opinion of it. But, because they thought that they are introducing it during COVID times, most people will not respond they will not give their opinion. But, a few handful of youth, literally just a handful of youth in Kerala, in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka mostly, and in Maharashtra, and some in Assam, some in Delhi, they presented websites, they informed some of the activists and they got active, and they sent lakhs of emails to the government, and the government was so worried that it started shutting on these websites. Now, what is so problematic about the EIA draft? In a democracy, we vote our representatives in, give taxes to ensure for smooth functioning of the government, and hope that they will use those powers to serve us. But what happens in the name of development? Environment has become an accepted collateral. The previous governments assumed that every route to economic growth is being indebted to international financial institutions. But is that what we wanted? That really is not the case. It has sought funds, the governments in the past have sought funds from the World Bank and International Monetary Funds to help expensive but environmentally damaging development projects, especially dams. This reminds me of a brilliant quote from Arundhati Roy from her book, Cost of Living, a sentiment which I quite echo. She writes, build a dam to take water away from 40 million people, build a dam to pretend to bring down to 40 million people. It's like, you want to build a dam and then, bring those villages down. You're killing so many people, but then on the excuse that you're bringing water to 40 million people. Who are these gods that govern us? Is there no limit to their powers? The Modi government, on the other hand, is only becoming truly Atmanirbhar by realizing that seeking funds internationally comes with its list of, without realizing what happens is when the international funds give you the funds, it comes with certain conditions, which the governments forget. They feel that let us enjoy the loot while we are in power, the next government can pay off those bills. The Congress government was obsessed with size, like building. The government was obsessed by size and thought that by building big dams, they would usher in the development that they so sought. We have several examples of ministers traveling abroad, gawking at the development there, and after returning home, throwing in speeches of how they plan to make their city and country into a Shanghai, Australia, Tokyo, or a London. They forget that India has its own challenges and we need to bring India, we have to maximize the potential in India, not copy the West. Okay, a cursory study of some of the big dams reveals that a colossal failure what these projects are, far outweighing the successes. Now, Indian politicians don't try to understand that how these beautiful countries in Europe clean up their garbage. They do not bother that how they recycle their plastic, but they want to copy everything from there without understanding that they have fixed the basics first. As early as in the 4th century BC, Chandragupta Maurya and Kautilya, Chanakya were concerned about wildlife conservation. They had formulated laws to deal with those inflicting cruelty on animals and were focused on the education of, as well. The situation really became dangerous when the government and the municipal corporation assembly and the center all belonging to the same party, and then they bring in an ineffective justice system and sold out media, and the situation really becomes potent, like the way it's happening today with BJP being in the center and it being in power in the several states as well. Kerala is lucky to have a communist government, but I believe even the communist government has its own stakes. And that's the reason I was just reading a study the other day where it says that even the Kerala government has lost almost 60% of its forest cover, which is really tragic. And that's the reason what happens is when you lose the green power, we lose the ability to hold the water in. On one hand, when during the rains, there is nothing, there's no vegetation to hold the water in, so there is flooding. And on the other hand, there is no vegetation, which soaks up the water. So when the atmosphere gets drying, when the rains dry up, there is still some groundwater, but because no water was saved by the forest, there is a drought situation, and we so conveniently forget all this. Okay, and now coming back to the EIA, if there was anything that COVID, to our present discussion, if there's anything that the COVID crisis has taught the world, it is that, how not to take environment for granted. Okay, we saw several videos of how when there was a lockdown and, how animals started taking to the streets, the water stream started getting cleaner. We were hearing news about birds, you could hear bird sounds, you could hear animal sounds. I am in USA where, I could see so much change because the road traffic had drowned. There was a trail near my house where I go for a walk. And suddenly you could hear all these birds so clearly, which you could never hear when there was so much traffic. So what has the COVID crisis taught us? If you know that there has been so much destruction of environment and destruction of the economy, people have lost their jobs. But one thing we need, if we do not learn lessons from this COVID, then see, this is again nature's way of reminding us to go back to nature, which we have been forgotten to go. And if we do not learn this lesson, it would be a shame that during this century a pandemic like this happened and we lost that opportunity to learn something. Now, coming back to the present and to what EIA is all about, for any major project which may affect the environment, an environment clearance is necessary. What is the importance of an environment clearance? Okay, there we have this Environment Protection Act in 1986. Actually, what happened was America and USA, if you remember, they went in for these large projects like dams, big industries. They went in for stone quarrying. They started to cut, roads and bridges through the mountains. But in the 90s, in the 80s and the 90s, they realized that they need to have an environment law in place. Otherwise, before the environment law, there was just self-regulation. The government could decide, okay, today we will not cut down a mountain or we will not cut down a forest. But leaving it to the government is dangerous because obviously the government has its own interests and they don't want to. They do not want to protect the environment in any way. Now, for any major project, okay, it's very important that some laws are there to stop indiscriminate farming where you cut down forests or you cut down mountains. The EIA, which was promulgated in 1994, the first EIA draft was presented in 1994, and since then we have added to the clearances like what should be done and what should not be done. But unfortunately, the present EIA draft eliminates all that good was done in the past. The EIA was established supposedly for the greater good of the people, but it has become the government's legal cover to literally take away the environment. What the government in the past did was, it used that, because a certain project meets with environment clearance, they said like, okay, we can allow this project, however dangerous it was. But that was not the reason for the Environment Protection Act. The reason the Environment Protection Act was put there was to stop and not to actually give them blanket permission to do whatever they want. The present EIA, it is not as if the environmentalists were happy with the EIA 2006 either, when the Modi government seeks to modify now. Actually, what the Modi, what we had to do, the environmental activists have been trying over the years to make it as strong as possible. But unfortunately, this government is trying to weaken it. Now, let's see what is the difference in the past and today. The 2006 bill vests power with the public to report violations. Earlier, the people could report violations. If they saw a project, they could report violations. But that is not the case today. Today, what is happening is that the government is just doing whatever it wants, and in the first instance, first of all, earlier what happened was that people had 30 days to give feedback. Like if they see a project somewhere, like you're like living in the jungles, like the tribals, usually what happens, most of the environmental projects are in the forests or in the mountains where we are not there. The tribals are there or the local people are there. So they were given 30 days to give a feedback, like whether they want the project to come up or no. And these are the projects which for 5 years or 10 years, the project would continue, but the people had only 30 days to report that whether it's good or no. Instead of giving them more days, what the present EIA draft of 2020 is trying to do is to even reduce those days to just 20 days of feedback. Now, these projects are run into thousands of pages, and, it takes a while to study them, but unfortunately, that's not happening. So what is happening is the draft was presented on March 12 to the public. Okay, are you all able to see my slide? I think I have lost it. Are you all able to see my slide?
Yes, now we can see that.
Okay, you can see it?
Yes, yes.
But the draft that was presented on March 12 during a COVID crisis when everybody else is worried, this EIA draft was presented and people were asked to give this feedback. Unfortunately, what happened? The postal offices, everything was closed. But if it had not been for the young environmentalists who opened websites and allowed them to give a chance to complain to the government, this thing no complaints would have been able to register. Now the Karnataka High Court was supposed to hear this matter, but unfortunately, even that matter is just getting delayed. Another major flaws is like the environmental norms seek a post facto clearance. What happens was earlier, before a project would be set up, when they want to cut down a mountain or bring down a forest, they had to ask permission from the government. But unfortunately, now they are not able to, do anything. Okay, I think my slide is lost. I am not able to. I'm not able to see my slide. Are you able to see my slide?
Yeah.
Or are you seeing?
No, you can see the slide.
Okay. Earlier what happened was the clearance has to be sought before, so that the government also knows that how badly damaging the mining would be, or the construction would be, or the power sector would be in that particular forest or the mountain. But that's not happening. So earlier, another one of this thing is they also can get away with fines now. The present EIA 2020 draft is dangerous also because first of all, the post facto clearance is you can start the project, and then you can, if somebody objects, then you can go back and get permission for that. And when you go back to the government can say, oh, okay, you have destroyed a forest, so you can just pay 1.5 or 2 times the cost of the damage done, and then you can continue with your project. And this is like a very dangerous precedent. The Supreme Court had already told them not to do this, but they are still doing it. So this is basically this is how governments help their corporate sector to do whatever they want. One thing governments forget, that natural resources belong to everybody, to each one of us. And so you cannot say that only a few sections of society can enjoy it, like the corporate sector can enjoy these resources, but the rest of the people can just live their daily lives. Now earlier only defense projects were considered strategic, but now the government can decide which project it considers strategic. So now when the project is strategic, the government can decide that it's not going to give the information to the public. So earlier this was not the case. The Modi government, obsessed with centralization of powers, has exhibited so much urgency that EIA draft has not been even presented to the state governments. Like I said initially, that they want to take away the powers from the state governments and the courts also. Earlier, again, 20 projects which were spread up over 20,000 square meters required prior clearance. But now, even if the project is there on 5 times more, like 1,50,000 square meters, also if the project is that big, it does not require an environment clearance. Now that's how big residential complexes are, or industries are. They do not have to get environment clearance. This is really dangerous. Now about 40 to 50% of Kerala is still under forest cover. 70% of northeast states are still under forest cover. The central government is trying to control these green covers now by trying to bring in this draft very hurriedly. Earlier, by what they are trying to do in northeast is, earlier they said that 100 kilometers of aerial distance from the line of control, they can control it. So it becomes government land. So they do not have to present it to the public. Now, again, this is a measure. This is how they want to control the forests in the northeast, which the northeast states and the people were protecting so far. This is again really, really very short-sighted of the government. There are many websites like Let India Breathe, Fridays for Future In, and there is no earthsbe.com. All run by youngsters in their 20s to mobilize 2.5 lakh feedback mails. That's how many feedback mails that they gave. But what the government did is not just block their sites, but they also threatened them with arrest under the Sedition Act, which is really unprecedented. It's never happened that environmentalists, environment activists have been threatened with this kind of sedition. Despite the court's directions to the government to publish the draft in all regional languages, the government has defied the direction and published the draft only in Hindi and English. Despite that, it is great that environment activists from Kerala, from Tamil Nadu, Karnataka came forward and objected to this EIA draft. Now, the worst impact of most of this environmentally damaging are faced by the tribals and the Adivasis. Many know that during the Britishers before 1947 demarcated tribal land as an excluded area, and it was outside the purview of the British rule. Like even the British rule understood that what is tribal land needs to be protected. They never interfered in that. However, when the Indian Constitution was promulgated, all the laws that applied to before to those excluded areas, with the Constitution, all the laws that apply to us also apply to these tribal areas. As a result, what happened is the government got a complete free hand to invade the forests and the mountains, which were till then protected and considered a national treasure. Now, what is the reason why if we are sitting in Kerala, like I'm sitting in USA, somebody else is sitting in Maharashtra, still need to worry about the environment? Now, the natural resources which was given by nature for it takes care of all our needs. We can survive without industries. We can survive, we can survive in the forest the way everybody did. But if we start cutting down the forests and the mountains, so soon there'll be flooding, so much flooding that it will drown the cities. Earlier, it was drowning only in the remote villages, but now it is drowning cities, and that is really dangerous. What was earlier, we used to think that environment issues are some of issues of the future, like what happens when a youth smokes or drinks. The effect of smoking or drinking is not seen for many years. In the same way, environmental damage is visible 20 years later. When I started out in my career in the 90s, I objected along with a lot of environmental activists against the big dams. We said that the effects will be seen soon, and the effects are indeed being seen today. What is happening is huge dams are blocking the water, not allowing the river water to go into the seas. As a result, the seas are drying up, and and that's the impact of the global warming that we are seeing now. Because the seas are drying up, there's no cool air being circulated, and the atmosphere every year it's just getting warmer. I can see the difference in the last 20 years. Now let's come back to Chhattisgarh, one of the states that is the worst affected today. Chhattisgarh is one of the most mineral-rich states, as yes, one of the poorest when it's not supposed. Why should a state remain poor when it is so rich in mineral resources? Because, our resources are being looted by outsiders like Adani Enterprises, who use their political clout and their brute money and muscle power to grab mining projects in this impoverished state. What the central government is trying to do is to give away all the mining to corporate industries, so that those industries can give these political parties their campaign money to fight elections and continue staying in power. So both the political parties and the corporate sector benefits. But what happens to the poor people? Instead of that, if the government had kept control of, say, mining, and then gave jobs to the local people, then the government would be rich and the people would be rich, even if the corporate sector wasn't given that kind of incentives. But today that we are seeing a very lopsided development, and that's where the youth needs to make themselves aware of, and not only educate themselves but educate others and protest what's happening. Now, I wanted to give you an example of Hasdeo Aranya. It's one of the forests it's a huge tract of dense forest in central India, covering 170,000 hectares and part of the elephant corridor, which stretches across central India. It is a traditional home of Adivasi communities. The forest, unfortunately, covers an estimated 5 billion tons of coal. 30 coal blocks have been identified in the Hasdeo Aranya forest by the Indian government, and it comes as no surprise that India's biggest private player in the coal industry, the Adani Group of Industry, is completely exploiting them. Its website lists 7 coal mines and 2 iron ore mines in Chhattisgarh, in which Adani is a mine developer and operator. Now, the Adivasis have been fighting this giant from 2013 onwards, but still they have not been able to make a difference. Now there is a different government in Chhattisgarh, and they are hoping that the Hemant Sardar will help them, but unfortunately, even the present state government is not helping them at all. Bhupesh Baghel government, the Congress government, is also not trying to stop this mining that's going on, because these corporations learn to bribe all the political parties. The repercussions for clearing forest areas are severe. Besides raising global temperatures, this immediate scarcity of water and water insecurity is evident in many districts which have witnessed large-scale deforestation. The United Progressive Alliance government in the past had given sanctions to these projects in a very ad hoc manner. Modi government was supposed to correct that, but instead of that, Modi government is, giving even more, making it under the pretext of ease of business, is trying to give environmental clearances left, right, and centers. The development projects are flagged off at an alarming speed, particularly dams, roads, railway lines, pipelines, and telecommunication networks through the country's national parks, sanctuaries, critical corridors linking wildlife resources. Hundreds of projects are cleared in a matter of days. Now, going back a little in history, the Congress government's idea of progress was unleashing a spate of dams, the bigger the better. India has less than 300 dams, had less than 300 dams in 1947. By the year 2000, there were over 4,000 dams. Currently, the total number of large dams is 5,254, with India ranking third after the USA and China where it comes to dam building. Over 96% of the dams built in the country are supposed to be for the purpose of irrigation, which rarely happens. Most of the water is diverted to industries, while farmlands are becoming dry and infertile. So what is happening is, not only are we diverting all these water to the industries and for irrigation, we are also saying, but we are also helping the farmers by, by channeling all this water for irrigation. But now the thing is, only very rich farmers can afford to have irrigation in their fields. So what happens to the poor farmers? Now the poor farmers make up to almost 80% of the total rural land. 60% of India is still a rural community, and we are not helping these people by, we are taking this. And so what happens is, not only are we damaging the environment, we are also in the future face a food crisis, not future in like 40-50 years, but in the next 10, 15, 20 years. We are already seeing a lot of damage there. Now, the Sardar Sarovar Dam, which was supposed to be one of the biggest prides of India, built on the Narmada River in Gujarat, was supposed to provide water and electricity to Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Maharashtra. The Sardar Sarovar Dam, the second largest in the world and India's largest, was envisioned in 1946 by Prime Minister Nehru, laid the foundation stone for the massive dam on 5th April 1961. But the work did not begin until like 1987. And the construction is on for the construction is still on. So a project that started in 1946, it finally started work on 87, but it is still on. There is construction on 30,000 canals still remaining, and the project is likely to finish only in 2025. 40 years after the tribunal award, only 36% of the network has been constructed. Now, what happens when so many years on the project drags on? First of all, the Sardar Sarovar Dam, when it was built, it drowned many villages. Okay, on top of that, escalates. Can you imagine the cost escalation of the See, this is again another part of the thing why central governments do big projects. The bigger the projects, the more bribe money they can get, because they can keep extending the project, and every time the project is extended, there is a cost escalation. There is bribe money to be paid by the constructors. It's like the construction companies have to keep on bribing the government in power so that they can keep on working on the project. So it was still inaugurated. Sardar Sarovar project was inaugurated on September 2017, when it was still incomplete because Narendra Modi decided to celebrate his 69th birthday there. So what if, for the purpose, when he decided to inaugurate the dam, the water level of the dam was deliberately raised, even though there was no water in the Narmada river then. The water level was still raised, resulting in the drowning of 178 villages. So to celebrate one man's birthday, to show that he has done some, he has completed a project which was started so many decades back. He started the project, but 178 villages were just drowned, and many people, environmentalists try to stop this from happening, but they could not. Decades later, we can ask this question: was this monstrous dam really necessary? The reason why I'm mentioning this dam is this is like, many times the government said that we need development, but development at what cost? So if we study Sardar Sarovar project, we will understand how wrong we are where it comes to development. Decades later, 330,000 people are 320,000 people are still waiting rehabilitation, and about 1 million people are supposed to have been affected by the river canal and the associated works. Okay, this is a huge number of people. The Sardar Sarovar project, part of the Narmada Valley Development Project, was estimated to have cost 400 billion in 2010-2011, and since then it has been revised. Earlier, the estimate was 64 billion. Now the cost till 2011 was 400 billion, and now it is still rising. And now the government has stopped even giving figures on how costly the project is becoming. Now, Kutch, one of the districts which was supposed to benefit from the dam, was declared as drought hit in 2011, 2012, and 2014, 2015. 56 years later, the dam has not solved the water crisis in Gujarat or in MP. So this is like, this can be used, the failure of the Sardar Sarovar project can be used as a case study on where our development is really going. Okay, Nitin Gadkari, the Transport Minister, is pushing the Coastal Road project with an aim to recreate Australia's Gold Coast project in Mumbai. Now, like I told you in the initial part of this of my speech, how these ministers, they go abroad to Europe, to USA, they get impressed by all the great roads and the bridges there, and they immediately want to come and copy it in India. But they forget that these countries took care of the basic issues first. They cleared up the garbage. They ensured that there's enough drinking water. They ensured that everybody has running water, they have clean water, and they have electricity. And then they focused on infrastructure projects. On the other hand, we are not fixing up anything. We are not taking care of any of our basic issues. And then we are jumping into these fancy projects. The Coastal Road project, the foundation stone for which was laid in December 2018, is an 8-lane expressway built on almost 9 lakh square meters of reclaimed land from the sea in Mumbai. Now, in Mumbai, what is happening is Mumbai is a city of built on 7 islands. So there are water bodies throughout the city, but the government there, the state government there and the central government there is trying to fill up all these water bodies so that they can build land there, they can build bridges there. So what is happening with that's the reason the flood waters, they have nowhere to go. The mangroves, lakhs and lakhs and lakhs. India is third in the world where it comes to mangroves. We have almost 6% of our land under mangroves. So what happens when you cut these mangroves? There is no way for the water to be soaked up, and so they have no way but to come into the cities. And Mumbai, like Kerala, is also being flooded every year. Especially 2005, 2006, there was such bad flooding. The city almost drowned. Parts of the city almost drowned. And that's when they decided to stop cutting the mangroves. But this government is like doesn't care. It's like, let's do the furious pace of a development. Now, nature has provided us for the next several centuries we can survive. But the reason the youth have to worry is because the previous generations have damaged so much already that the present youth is facing it. Now, the present youth, if they do not stop it, the future generations will also ruin the environment we live in. And the dangers is something which I'll come to later in this speech. Now, the thing is, according to a World Bank report, India can make green growth a reality by putting in place strategies to reduce environmental degradation at the minimal cost of just 0.2 to 4% of the GDP. So if the government spends only 0.02% to 0.04% of its GDP on taking care of its environmental, we can actually save ourselves 3.75 trillion. That is, by causing the destruction, it is costing us 5.7% of the GDP. So every year, 5.7%, like we do the damage to the environment, and then to correct that, we are set back by 5.7% of the GDP. Instead of that, if we spend just 0.02 or 0.04% of this GDP, we can actually save ourselves a lot of environmental damage. By choosing development over environment, the results are visible to everyone. State governments are on the verge of bankruptcy. We have many impoverished, indebted, and incarcerated people, more ravaged landscapes, including the most protected national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. The only ones who are profited are a handful of industrial families and the ruling party of the day. So except for them, nobody else. It's high time that the consistent failure of the governments to continue on the path of immense environmental damage, which could affect several generations. Now, the way to look at the environmental issue is that we think that, we are borrowing resources from the future. But actually, we need to remember that we are borrowing from the next generation. We are using up resources which we should have been actually saving for the next generation. Instead of that, we are using it today. So we are depriving. Every generation is depriving the next generation of the thing. Now, I wanted to share about oil fields of Patkai, Assam. There was last year, there was a oil well which was given permission in Assam, which was very close to the forest. Now, that forest is one of the most unique ones where lot of rare birds and species and animals can be found. Unfortunately, we are doing so much damage. See, like the oil well was built so close to the forest, there was an accidental fire, and that oil well for a year still it is burning. This May it got fire, and the oil fields are still on fire. And we have brought in support from Canada and all, but obviously it will take another 6 to 8 weeks before we control that. Now, as youth, the reason for me to do the speech is that we really feel that our immediate concern is education, getting a job, getting married, and that's it. But unless we pay attention to environment, we are trading bad health for development. We are already seeing the impact in cities where the pollution, water pollution, air pollution is causing immense distress. Okay, and if 10-15 years of this continues, then we are in severe danger. There are several sites which inform us, and I think it is a responsibility of each one of us to make sure that we understand where this damage is leading us, and whether this, the development is really worth the damage we are doing. Because once the damage is done, like if a forest is brought down, it's not that we can just keep planting the trees and correct the mistake. Like coal mining, the coal mining, I was reading the other days in Chhattisgarh, the coal mining, we have created such a big crater in one area in Chhattisgarh that the whole idea was that if you remove the coal, we keep digging, remove the coal, but then we are supposed to fill it up and then plant trees there, so that there can a new forest can come up there. But that's not what is happening, because to fill up that land requires a lot of mud, and where is the mud going to come from? And where is the and it has to be that kind of local mud, and it's not practically possible. So what is happening is one section of the society is doing all the damage. A very small percentage, the corporate sector, is doing the damage, and the brunt is borne by 98% of the rest of the population. So this is like dangerous, and I would like to stop here now. There are a few sites which you all can follow to learn more. One is Monger Bay. Then there is a South Asian network of dams, rivers, and people, and the short is sandrp.in. Let India Breathe, fridayforfuture.in, and there is no earthbeat.com. These are some of the sites which you can look up and get yourself educated. Hopefully, I have been able to convey how important it is for us to take care of our environment, so that, to try to get, to make, it's like, penny wise and pound foolish. We are looking at little benefits, but we are sacrificing a lot more for, that petty development. It's like, with every time mining gives us our maximum, contributes to 2.5% of our GDP, but unfortunately the mining is also costing us a lot in terms of environmental damage. So when we try to correct environmental damage, it negates all the growth that we are seeing through development. So we are doing far more damage than what we are actually getting in. So this excuse is just not valid. Anyway, thanks a lot for hearing me patience. Sorry, I had some technical issues as well. Hope we can continue this conversation on another day as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for your presence and presentation. It really gives us a lot of information and news about what's happening around us for all this time. And your presentation and speech itself make us understand how keenly you observe everything. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. Now it's time for the interaction section. I kindly request those who are interested to ask questions to mention their names in the chat box. I kindly request those who are interested to ask the question to the resource person to mention their names in the chat box. Thank you.
Okay, you all were not supposed to see my script. Sorry, looks like I I lost my screen sharing in between. I don't know how that happened. But if anybody wants to see the slide share, I can send it to you later through Ranju. I can send you a document as well. So, you all can refer it if I missed out some things. It's an interesting share, which I had worked on it for a while, but unfortunately I messed it up. But sorry. Yes, sorry. Yeah, thanks a lot, Sri Lakshmi, for that wonderful introduction and the ending as well. And if you all have any questions, I can take that now.
So one of our faculty asked you a question, ma'am. In your perspective, what the good or bad EIA 2020 is?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that question, Arvind. EIA 2020 in my mind is extremely drastic. It's disastrous. It's like terrible, and it needs to go. EIA draft 2020 was supposed to have, we had a lot of problems with the earlier draft, okay, 2006 and 2016 as well. No, 2006, we had a lot of problems which had to be corrected in the 2020 draft. But unfortunately, what happened is whatever little protection that we had in the earlier draft, even that has gone away in this particular draft. So no, it's really bad. It has to go, and that's the reason there's so much protest against it. Actually, it gives a lot of freedom to the corporate sector to do maximum damage to our forests and mountains. So that's not a good thing. Yeah.
And next, Brain asked the question, why is the media silent about this?
Unfortunately, what happened?
I think there occurs a technical.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, sure, ma'am. You're audible.
Okay, now the thing is, why is the reason media is silent on that? You know, what happens is we are seeing a very fascist government in rule right now. It has all the tendencies of a fascist government. The first thing that they do is to try to shut the media off. So if you see, there's a lot of discussion on everything, like even this, right now there's a discussion on Sushant Singh Rajput, you know, how that actor committed suicide, was he killed, you know, other nonsense, and Kangana Ranaut, an actress, being given so much footage on this thing. So the real issues in the country before us now is the farmers issues, the environment issue, the unemployment. These are issues not being talked about. Like I said in the speech, the government is of the view that, look, you have given us the power, let us rule. Now you all just get out of the way. So the same way, even the media is being silenced. Like, just get out of the way, let us do our work, you know, and let us destroy whatever we want to do. Let us loot whatever we want to do. And so media has been systematically silenced because of this. And otherwise, they are harassed by the government. Media survives on government ads. They're not giving them ads. So, you know, for a lot on law because of this.
So those who are interested to ask questions for a resource person, you can mention your name in the chat box. There is only limited time for us for the interaction section. So be happy, guys. Okay, I think interaction section have wind up. Next, I would like to the student representative for the feedback.
Okay, Sri Lakshmi, if somebody has any more questions for me, they can always connect me on my email. They can connect with me through RITHU. You know, I don't mind having a one-to-one also with this thing. I know there was a technical glitch here on my side, but but I would like to, if there's anybody who wants, I just, you know, the whole idea of this talk was to get people, you know, interested in environment. I'm sure once they get interested, they will start doing their own research, and you know, they'll try to become more curious. So the whole idea was to make them more curious, and if I've made them curious, I've succeeded. The technical glitches, I think, can be ignored. But if they want to have a one-to-one conversation with me, I am willing to do that. Because, you know, after one such speech, one of the guys had asked me that, you know, why should development be sacrificed? Why should the Adivasis and the tribals be consulted? Because, you know, those people are against development anyway. And my answer to them was, we are stepping into their land. You know, they have taken care of forests and mountains for centuries, and they have ensured that we outside those forest areas live safely because they have safeguarded the forest. We cannot just march into their land, tell them we are taking your forest away, we are leaving you without your houses, without your land which you've had for centuries, and, you know, make you into laborers, you know, push you into poverty, and then, you know, eventually push us ourselves also into poverty. Eventually we will also suffer the same fate. And that is something which, you know, we need to have a longer vision over this, which we unfortunately lack in today's day and time. Yes, I see there was some question that popped up.
Yeah, from Aravind. Ma'am, again, I'm asking one question. It's from Aravind Jainaya. So, present situation, majority of people who are not aware about the problems of EIA 2020 start any campaign for the same.
Yes, of course, you must, you know, for that, you need to educate yourself first, what exactly, how dangerous it is. And then, you know, you start, then you start asking, you start asking the right questions to the government. Unless and until you are not aware of what the problem with the draft is, you cannot explain to the people. And you need to educate. You know, one of the things I remember, the Kerala, the Malayali YouTuber, I forget, he has millions of viewers, I forget his name now, but I'm sure you all can look him up. And then there was a very ordinary girl in Tamil Nadu as well. She also had millions of views. Now the thing is, the girl actually had a YouTube which was very makeup oriented. She used to share tidbits on makeup and remedies and stuff like that. And suddenly she spoke about EIA, and the BJP troll army went after her. How can you talk about environment? You mind your own business, blah blah blah. That girl said, look, I have said it in very simple terms what EIA is. See, environmentalists may not be able to explain it that to the people in very simple terms, but ordinary citizens, if they understand it and they say it in their own words, it makes a lot more impact. And so it went to the villages, and that's the reason only a few states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka have actually come forward and protested against this. The rest of the country is still sleeping because they have not been made aware of the EIA draft at all.
So I think for better convenience, I switched to my mother tongue. The resource person, the presentation, Karen, I hope you all understand what she had presented. So നിങ്ങൾക്ക് സംശയം ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അത് മലയാളത്തിലായിക്കോട്ടെ ഇംഗ്ലീഷിലായിക്കോട്ടെ മാമിനോട് ചോദിക്കാവുന്നതാണ്. ഷി വിൽ റിപ്ലൈ ഓർ അതർവൈസ് നമ്മുടെ ചാറ്റ് ബോക്സിൽ വന്ന് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ആയിട്ട് ചോദിക്കാവുന്നതാണ്. So first mention your name in the chat box. Hope it's clear. So here's a question from Gina Teresa. Ma'am, I think some people signed a petition against AIA. Do you think there is any benefit from that?
Okay, Gina, that's a very, very interesting question to ask. That there were millions, not just the thing. There was 2.5 lakh from, in the first few days itself, the first week itself, there were more than 3 lakh, 4 lakh petitions that were signed, and then the websites were closed. The government was so worried that how are people sending so many mails even during a COVID crisis? They thought that during a COVID crisis, if they bring in the draft, people will not have time to read the draft. People will not have any time to communicate. They won't even have time to go to the postal offices to drop in their objections, which is how it was done. No meetings would be held. What happens is the collector would hold meetings in villages, where objections can be raised. But because of the COVID crisis, there were no meetings happening. So the government thought that it will, quietly pass the bill and nobody would even come to know. But some volunteers, just a handful of volunteers, made sure that they put it on their websites, and they managed to send emails, those automated emails. And the government was so worried that they thought it's an attack from another country, and they tried to dismiss it off, saying that, oh, no, some political parties, it's some mischief mongers who are doing it, or some, it's not the actual people who are sending these emails, which is not right. Now, this government is not interested, actually, because it's the law. They had to put the draft in front of the people for their feedback. So that is why they are trying to tamper the law, so that next time they don't have to do it. But because they had to present it in front of the people, they had to ask for feedback, but they are not really interested in feedback. That is the tragedy of this government, that they are not interested in the feedback. It's not as if we say something and so the courts have to interfere, but unfortunately the courts are also right now totally subjugated to this government. So we are in terrible times at the moment, and that's the reason the youth need to be totally aware of not just environment issues, the employment issues and the education issues, but also the environment issues. See, what happens is when we have a good government in place, we can relax. But when we have a government in place which is determined to loot, its only purpose is to loot us, then we as people in a democracy, we need to get up. We need to make our voices heard. We cannot become slack, because that we cannot correct it. It takes years, centuries for nature to put up a forest or this thing. We cannot plant 30,000 trees today and say, oh, there'll be a forest in 5-6 years or 10 years later. It takes years. Yes, thank you.
So anybody else to ask questions? Yeah, taking questions. Okay, there is a question from Ashwin Kumar. Okay, Ashwin, now we can ask the question. Ashwin, are you there? Okay, Ashwin, you can ask the question. Hello, can you hear me? question is in the top. Okay. Oh yeah, sure. He already asked the question, ma'am. In Philippines, the students are asked to plant 10 trees for graduation, but still there is so much activities to support the environment in our country, government, and people are not giving any value for the environment.
People are not giving any yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like initially in the talk itself I gave an example that people think that, oh, youth especially, they think that if we smoke today, it's no big deal, we'll be fine, and then the ill effects show up 20-30 years later. It's the same thing with the environment. People think that because the damage is happening elsewhere, in the forest elsewhere, in the mountains elsewhere, not in my city, not in my town, I can relax. But the Kerala floods, the COVID crisis, the Nipah virus attack, they are all reflective of the damages that we are doing to the environment. The nature is created in such a way that it can sustain life, and it has done so for centuries. But what has been stable in the last 5,000, 10,000 years, we are destroying it in less than 30, 40 years. And our lifespan is 75, 80 years, but in our lifespan itself we'll see the damage. See, like I was also reading about Munnar forest, the forest fires that's happening now. The government blames that the tribals are lighting up the fires. That's not true at all. In California, in USA, in California, there are forest fires because the wood has gone dry. There is no water there. There's so much of dry wood that the fire rages on for days, and it is destroying $1 million homes in the nearby vicinity. So the fires from the forests are slowly coming inside. Once they destroy the forest, where will it, where will the fire go? It will come back to the cities and the towns. It's the same way with the floods. The floods are coming into the cities now. It's not happening elsewhere. It is coming in our cities now, and we need to be alert about that.
So here we have a question from our faculty member Renju Chandran. So you can ask question now.
He's on mute.
Mom, I was so much keen that I want my people to my students to listen to you, and I don't know how many of them actually heard about the recent articles on in our weekly newspaper. There is Adirapalli, which is which is very much bio reserves and with a lot of species. And now recently the government is start cutting the trees from over there, and which is very much close to, I mean, where we get a lot of water for the Kerala, actually, where the tiger reserves all are there. But none of the youth or none of the people are still, they are not at all entertained or not at all act. How we can actually educate these youth, and how can we make them to understand that without the forest, our survival is not possible. And I don't know, for the last 4 decades, the Kerala government has cut down the forest around 9 lakh hectares of land, I think, in the forest. I think
Right.
1/4 of the Kerala's land. And still, the people of Kerala is not aware about this destruction of the environment. Now, I don't know how myself or the nature lover students can bring a change, can act against this.
Well, Kerala has already lost more than 50% of its forest cover. So, just 50% is remaining. So, at least we need to protect that. For that, we really need to be more aware. We really need to be more aware. So, development has to go with the quality of life. Like, in the rest of the world, America and Europe decided it's causing so much damage to the environment. And that's why they started putting environmental laws in place in the 80s and the 90s, and they forced India also to stop the damage, because it's not as if Kerala will not be affected by what's happening in Bihar or Chhattisgarh or Maharashtra. It will be, because Western Ghat covers the entire western area, so all the states come there. So every state it will be affected, and then when every state is affected, the country is affected, even neighboring countries will be affected, and that's how the damage is everywhere. It's not as if America contributes to the global warming, India will not be affected. Of course, India will be affected too. And India right now is doing maximum environment damage, and the rest of the world will take notice. And I am sure, because Modi government keeps going and promising that we will take care of this, we'll go back to renewable sources of energy and not coal. We will stop mining, but they never take care of the promises made, and the world will eventually wake up to the damage that India is doing, and impositions will follow, I'm sure, sometime very, very soon. Okay, so the thing is, we cannot say like, okay, it's not going to affect us in any way. It is definitely going to affect us. The youth need to be aware that like every subject that they study, our environmental science unfortunately is very static. Like all the subjects we study, we first of all need to have a good government in place. On top of that, our education has to improve. We need to be more aware of the world around us. Our sociology, our history, our environmental science, everything needs to be upgraded to make it more dynamic. We need to be aware of the damages that's happening around us. But otherwise also, if the education doesn't do it, if the government doesn't do it, then we need to be proactive. We have to be interested in what's happening around us, because we will suffer. It's not as if somebody else will suffer, we will suffer. Then we understand that we will suffer, we will not be safe, then the interest will come.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am, for your very valuable time. Your presentation really enlightened us. So I think most of we had covered up, and most of it cleared your doubts. So that was the end of our interacting sections. Thank you for all your kind support. Thank you, everyone. So,
Okay,
one last question from Mary Joseph, a faculty member. Since the environmental issues are arising in recently, according to your view, how can we educate youth and promote youth to come in front to respond and react to the government?
Okay, now first thing, one thing I want, thanks a lot for that question, Mary. Now the thing is, we need to understand that the natural resources that's there, it belongs to all of us, not to just certain sections of the society, not just to the government, not just, the government is only the caretaker for us for that 5 years only. They cannot be allowed to do so much damage that we are deprived of it. We need to have access to clean water, air. Our groundwater is drying up. We need to become more and more aware of it. We need to, Chennai is all Tamil Nadu. Chennai is already suffering from groundwater. There's water shortage there in the cities now. So how far do we need to be pushed? We can survive without a few industries, but we cannot survive without water and air. Try to close your nose and try to count the money. Can you do it? That's how important. How important environment is for us. You cannot close your nose and count the money. So how important is development? So development and environment issues has to go hand in hand. We need to have sustainable development models, which unfortunately this government right now does not have. If the government doesn't have it, then we have to push the government. If we have to push the government, we need to educate ourselves. So the faculty members the changes has to come in the environment, in the education sector at all. We need to make the start. We should have made the start years ago. We cannot delay anymore. So we individuals who are on this call, who are a little more aware of these things, need to educate few more, and then that's how this grows. It's like the employment. We thought that youth, it's the employment until people started losing their jobs, till they realized that the youth are not getting any more jobs. They did not take to the streets. In the last 5 years, farmers have been fighting separately, the youth have been fighting separately, the doctors have been fighting separately, the government employees have been fighting separately, the public sectors that has been sold, their employees are fighting separately. But they all need to understand this government has only one purpose in mind: to sell everything in sight, and every fight is our fight. So we cannot have just a handful of environmental activists fighting for us. It is our battle as well, and we need to become quickly aware of this.
So thank you, ma'am, and that was the end of interacting section, and you really replied their question. in a very sincere way that they can clear their simple doubts in a very simple way. And thank you so much, ma'am, for your presence. Really enlighten us. So moving on to the next. Now I would like to invite Priyan Prince for the feedback, our student representative. I welcome Priyan for the feedback. Priyan, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here. Good evening to all respected dignitaries and my dear colleagues. The past 30 minutes, Ms. Nida has spoken about many vital environmental issues and her opinions and concerns over these topics. And I have to admit, I was in the dark about many of these topics, including EIA and its contribution to protecting our environment and how the government was going to abuse it. But I think that's a problem. Even today, there are many citizens who do not understand the need for environmental protection and suffer for it. As Ms. Vijayalakshmi has said, knowledge about these issues need to be more widespread so that people can understand the way seemingly innocuous actions could result in long-term damages. Take the landslides in Kerala, for example. Last year alone, there have been an ever-increasing amount of landslides that occur in the northern regions of the state. Recent reports suggest that the rampant quarrying operations, which are conducted in eco-sensitive zones, are responsible for them. It's not the first time that the concerns of the quarrying activities were raised. However, local officials chose to turn a blind eye to the operations, and as a result of not understanding the risk it put the local residents under, it cost the lives of over 100 people. Despite the complaints of the local residents, it seems that many of these illegal quarrying operations have the support of local politicians and bureaucrats. It is not the first time the government has ignored plans that could adversely affect the environment, and as Ms. Nada has suggested, they seek to actively exploit it and gain from it. In our quest for resources, they have forgotten that overexploitation of resources have adverse effects on people's lives. Thus, we must strongly speak out to convey that we understand such practices are detrimental to our future and that we will stand against one to fight against those who continue to do so. As the end to our webinar comes to a close, and before I pass on the mic to Sri Lakshmi, I would like to convey my gratitude to you, Ms. Vijay Lakshmi, for sharing your unique insight with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you very much, Priyan. Apologies again for the technical difficulties, but yes, I'll make it up with a personal chat with whoever is interested. Yes, Sri Lakshmi.
Okay, thank you, Priyan. Now I would like to invite Sarigama Michael for the vote of thanks.
All the resource person, principal, vice principal, teachers, and all participants. It gives me immense pleasure to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of our RITHU Club. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to God Almighty for making today's webinar a big success. I would further extend hearty thanks to our resource person, Ms. Vijayalakshmi Nada, Bureau Chief, the Indian Observer in USA, who spent time from her busy schedule. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to express our profound gratitude to Principal Father Baiju Pongemballi, who had always been a great source of inspiration for all of us. Thank you, Father. I would like to thank our Vice Principal, Ms. Pushpa John, for her motherly love and guidance. Thank you, ma'am. Next, I would like to extend my gratitude to RITHU Club coordinators, Mr. Renju Chandran and Ms. Mary Joseph, for organizing and making all necessary arrangements for this webinar. Thank you, Renju sir and Mary Miss. Success of an event is not possible without dedication. Thanks to Father Jijo, Father Sharon, Chapo sir, HODs, and all faculty members for all your support. I would like to thank all the RITHU Club members, especially those who worked hard these days to make this event a great success. Thank you all. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants, not only from our college, but from various colleges, without whom our event would not have been a success. So, I thank each one of you for your participation till the end. If you truly love nature, you will find beauty everywhere. So, study nature, love nature, stay close to nature. It will never fail you. Once again, I thank you all for your cordial cooperation. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarigama. So we have provided feedback form in our chat box. So certificates will be issued only to those who fill the feedback form. And the resource person has shared a YouTube link there. Okay. So thank you everyone who joined this meeting and make this a very successful one. Once again, thank you, Vijayalakshmi ma'am, for joining us. Thank you to the entire club members of RITHU, our HODs, our participants, everyone for spending your time with us. And thank you so much for your presence and cooperation and your time. So that was that, guys. This is me, Srilakshmi, and we're signing out, wishing you all a very fruitful and very nice. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So now we can leave the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.